All right, everybody, welcome back to the AFC Northcast. I'm Justin here, joined this time with Joey.
Hey, guys.
What's up? So we're going to talk this week about NFL Week 17, which is the last week of the regular season. So that's it. Regular season football is over. That's it. On to the postseason. So we're going to talk, obviously, about the two divisional games this week, which should be fun. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the news that you guys have been hearing about after the games, but we're going to kind of keep it a little bit tapered because we don't have Chad here. So we're going to do next week what we'll end up doing is a little bit more in-depth review of like the seasons. We're going to talk about like season wrap-up, kind of overviews, talk about maybe like a first kind of leg of what we're looking at with the draft, kind of things like that. And then we'll also do our AFC North player of the, not player of the week, but like our all AFC North team draft that we were kind of talking about doing. So that stuff's going to be coming next week. Since I know what was on your mind is, how are they going to podcast next week with no AFC North football? Well, trust me, we got plenty in store for you. So,
Friends.
Yeah. Tune in. We'll still be here. We'll still be talking some football, and we'll still be talking AFC North. Be good stuff, though. But I'm sure y'all are excited for the postseason. Joey, specifically.
I know I am.
Right. So with that, let's kind of kick it off first into the first game to wrap up the season, which is going to be the Steelers and the Ravens. So Joey, talk about a little bit about that game.
Yeah. So the national media heading into this game, the whole narrative was that, the last time that these teams played, which was week 5, the Ravens beat the Steelers in overtime, and the defense was great. Duck Hodges came in at the end of the game after Mason got sent to the Shadow Realm, and even he looked pretty good at the end of that game, forced overtime, and so everybody was picking the Steelers. Well, it turns out that Duck Hodges is an undrafted free agent quarterback.
Yeah.
And James Conner didn't play. And the defense is great and everything, but there was not a big enough drop-off from Lamar and Mark Ingram to RG3 and Gus Edwards, who had a day. Gus Edwards. He probably made himself a lot of money in Week 17.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With Mark Ingram being the obvious guy in Baltimore, Gus Edwards is going to be the guy that someone takes a chance on, signs him in free agency as a starter, or maybe Eric DeCosta can even get value for him now.
Right.
But
is Gus Edwards in a contract year? Or?
I don't think so. Just
okay. Future tense.
In the general future, yeah.
Right.
But the offense looked good against RG3 made his first start in like 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Since the Cleveland Browns.
High-powered defense. They ran the option a lot. RG3 was out there running a lot. It does feel different when you see RG3 taking hits than other guys, but it was a close game. I mean, the Ravens were obviously diminished on offense because of the guys that were sitting out. Their first 3 scores were all field goals, one from like inside the 5-yard line. So some of the magic just wasn't there. But so entering the fourth quarter, I think it was like 16-10, and the Steelers had some chances. There was a sequence in the game that really sealed it. The Steelers were punting from about inside their own 20, and Jordan Berry, the Steelers punter, muffed the snap and dropped the ball, picked it up, and when he got tackled, he fumbled it into the end zone, and the Ravens scored. On the subsequent kickoff, the Ravens did that thing that some teams do sometimes. Like sometimes Justin Tucker just bangs it out the back of the end zone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they kind of like pooch kicked it, and the ball just kind of like skipped around to inside the 5, and the Steelers had to field it. It was a sloppy, muddy game. And so they started with like really shitty field position, and then Duck Hodges took an intentional grounding in the end zone for a safety. So that was like a couple plays apart in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Where it started, it was 19-10, and then all of a sudden it's 28-10. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
what the hell?
Right.
So that was the final score. And so things just kind of fell apart. The weather had a lot to do with it, and
Yeah, dude.
the defense for the Ravens looked good, and the offense did enough. Chad and I talked last week about the Steelers, and we were talking about the playoffs and kind of what the ceiling was for the team. And I think we like 21 points. Like they only scored over 21 or 24 points like once this year, the Steelers.
Yeah, I'll look that
Something
up.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
We had a long conversation about points scored, and because we talked about how many times the Steelers scored in different ranges and how many times the Ravens scored in different ranges and what the likelihood of the Steelers actually winning was. And the Ravens scored 28 points, and I don't know if the Steelers have scored 28 points all year.
No,
so,
they haven't. I mean, 27 is the highest against the Dolphins.
There you go. So that was the magic number, and so the Steelers didn't win.
Right.
And that's what it came down to. There was no egregious like errors that Tomlin made or anything like that. The Steelers forced some turnovers, just weren't able to capitalize. And we kind of knew coming in that that's what it was going to be like. That's how they've been playing football for the last month or so.
Yeah, it kind of fell in line with expectations. Something that's kind of interesting for me is that Joe Mixon had more yards from scrimmage than Robert Griffin III had yards total.
Yep.
Right. So, I'm sorry, not yards from scrimmage, more rushing yards, just rushing. So we'll get into that. But yeah, that's not kind of interesting. So RG3, 96 yards passing total and 50 yards rushing. So not necessarily what I would call a career game.
No,
but he got the job done, right? I mean, things happened.
Yeah, I mean, they got the win. They were sitting some guys.
For sure.
Marshall Yanda.
Mm-hmm.
It was rainy and gross outside, and so they didn't really change much. They ran the same offense. They ran a bunch of option plays, and when he ran, he was effective. Yeah. 8 carries for 50 yards. Like,
yeah,
that doesn't suck.
No. So another thing too. So I guess looking at the Steelers, they benched Duck Hodges in the middle of this game. Mason Rudolph came out to save the day. He put the cape on and said, "Don't worry about it, coach. I got this one." Got injured. Got put back out. Duck came back in. I'm sure confidence wasn't broken at all. He just was like, next man up. And yeah.
Chad mentioned, I don't know if it was in our podcast chat or in another group chat, that Duck Hodges mindset coming back in.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you get benched for performance in a game,
yeah,
like mentally you just check out.
Yeah, I can see
you're
that.
You're not
yeah.
into the game anymore. Like, you're not expecting to have to go back into the game. So he had to contend with that, within himself.
Yeah.
And the Steelers had to, play the quarterback carousel for one more game.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see where this goes into the offseason. There's still people talking about Ben Roethlisberger, like, actually legitimately retiring, and I don't know, man. I could see Tomlin on his knees after looking at what Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges brought to the table and just saying, please, just give us another season so we can just keep bridging or whatever it is, Plus, I think that Roethlisberger maybe feels like he has something to prove going into the next season. Or maybe he has nothing to prove going into next season because, well, obviously look at, Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph. Even though the Steelers have won games, like you said, the Steelers haven't scored more than 28 points in a single game this season. They've only scored more than 24 points in 3 games. That was against the Bengals, the Dolphins, and the Colts, which I believe that was from the defense that scored those points anyways on the Colts game. So, yeah, I don't know, man. It'll be interesting to see kind of how this transitions into the offseason, what they want to do at the quarterback position, but we will definitely talk about that in more detail.
Yeah,
with Chad.
One bright spot, Benny Snell. I mean, this was like a Benny Snell game.
Mm-hmm.
It was rainy and gross, and AFC North, the Ravens were playing the hard-nosed run-the-ball football, and Benny Snell had like 5 yards of carry. His touchdown run was like a really tough run. He ran through a couple guys. So that's something that if you're a Steelers fan, you got to like, you know, the Smash Mouth brand of football.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the Steelers couldn't really stop the run game at all from the Ravens, even when you're looking at, I mean, two backups and the offensive line, right? Still, I guess not deprecated, that's not the right word, but, you know, not with their starters. So, you know, Gus Edwards putting up 130 yards rushing. This defense that's supposed to be like this elite defense all year just couldn't stop the Ravens. And I think that kind of just goes to show the level between, you know, that team that the Ravens have turned into this year versus this team that the Steelers have been all year and have been kind of like, I don't know. I think it exposed the Steelers a little bit, in my opinion, for what they've had all year. So, I don't know.
Yeah, and without Stephon Tuitt, like the interior line of the Steelers is still good, but it's part of the whole pendulum swing with the whole league that we talked about more last year with the passing game. And if you look at the strengths of the Steelers defense, it's Hayden and Fitzpatrick and Watt and Dupree on the edges. And like these guys aren't run defenders. And that's what the Ravens have encountered most of the year, you know, outside of like the Bills and the first time they played the Browns. Like the Ravens just run all over everybody because no one is built to stop it.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens, I guess. But I don't know, man. I think the Steelers are a little bit exposed, and I think that going into next season, we'll kind of see how they play with the whatever weapons they might have. I don't know. James Conner, I'm interested to see what happens. I think it's going to show that James Conner obviously is a product of the offensive line, right? He's also struggled this year with injuries, so I don't know. I'm interested to see what happens with him next year. Ben Roethlisberger, I think if you're a Steelers fan, you're begging for him to come back just to kind of keep you alive. But in reality, I think you need to start looking forward to bridging towards a future. And maybe a little, I don't know, maybe this is a little hasty, but maybe a little bit of a rebuild from them because I don't know.
Yeah, they're in a weird spot. They're kind of in a similar spot like the Bears last year. Not that their defense is that good, but it's good. And they've got a bunch of guys locked up, you know, everyone but like Dupree, all the main guys are going to be there. And then you've got this shit show of an offense.
That's what I'm saying.
Like, what do you do?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe they...
We talked before the podcast about Joe Flacco. You know, if Ben doesn't come back, for real though, if Ben doesn't come back and they're a prime candidate for like a bridge veteran guy.
Right.
To bring in, or Jameis Winston. Oh, that'd be great, wouldn't it? That'd be
for the rest of the AFC North, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I think obviously, like, so kind of to wrap that up, the Steelers' future is completely contingent and hinged on Ben Roethlisberger. So they really need to like rebuild specifically the offense, because obviously, like the defense is, you know, that's. But they need to rebuild around either a new quarterback or, I don't know, signing Ben Roethlisberger to a 20-year fucking deal or something. I don't know.
Plus, I don't understand how the Steelers defense has been pretty good for the better part of like 2 decades. And even when the offense is good, like I don't understand how the Steelers have so much success and their coordinators aren't constantly getting poached. It's like every year that the Ravens are good, they lose their coordinators. It's probably going to happen again this year.
We'll see.
Like Greg Roman is interviewing with everybody and their mom. Wink Martindale has already been linked to the offensive coordinator for LSU this year, saying that like if Wink Martindale gets a head coaching job anywhere, that he's bringing that guy with him. And like talk about like a twin bill, like that's a hell of a ticket to sign on to, like those two guys, what they've done this past year with their teams. Like it's like, man, I mean.
So John on Facebook says that he says $5 the Ravens get bounced in the playoffs.
I mean, that's like a Ravens versus the field. That's
Right.
What round? I'll take that bet for the divisional round.
But we'll talk more about that when we get into the actual playoffs. So obviously the first week we'll kind of see how that develops, and then the next week of the playoffs we'll talk more specifically. But I don't know. It depends on who their opponent's going to be, man. It really does. I think the team that you're most worried about is the Chiefs, to be honest with you. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. But
the championship round, I do not want to play the Titans.
Really?
I don't.
I think they just kind of like hit lightning in a bottle, and I think it's just going to disperse. I think it's going to be what happens every season is they squeak their way into the playoffs, and then all of a sudden they get turns out they're fraudulent, and they lose in the
Achilles
playoffs.
heel of the Ravens defense is the run game, and Derrick Henry is a load. So I don't know.
Yeah,
the Chiefs are obviously the biggest team I don't want to face. I would love, well, if New England wins, they wouldn't play the Ravens in the second round, but man, I'd love to play New England.
Yeah, I'm sure that would feel good.
I don't care what round, just like let me play New England.
What about do you guys have the opportunity to play the Bills? I think it's interesting to see them develop.
If New England wins, we'll play the winner of Texans Bills.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would be
Texans,
a good game.
I don't
Run
know.
it back. It was a good game the first time.
It's weird because at this point I'm trying to find like who I guess could beat the Ravens. It's tough,
the
man.
Texans do this weird thing too, where like it all depends on their offense. Their defense stinks.
Yeah.
And so it just depends. Like their offense has sputtered, but when they're clicking and they're good, and DeAndre Hopkins is going, and Will Fuller is going, and Carlos Hyde is going, like they're good.
But the thing
it just depends what offense is going to show up that day for the Texans.
But the thing with the Texans for me is the fact that, just like you said, their defense kind of stinks, right? So what you're relying on is that the offense of the Texans is going to score more points than the offense of the Ravens. And I don't know, man. With that kind of a defense, the defensive matchup at least, I just don't see it happening. Most of the Texans are relying on the pass, right? And that's where the strength of the Ravens defense is. So
yeah, that's what makes the Chiefs the biggest threat is that they're the team left that has the offensive firepower
and a decent defense.
And they've had a fantastic defense,
right? Yeah. So, which is why I also think that the Bills would be kind of interesting. Because the defense is great. The defense is really good. And I think Josh Allen brings an interesting dynamic that's obviously not the same as Lamar Jackson, but has a little bit of a stench to it, a little bit of a whiff to it, Yeah. But obviously they're a little bit more pass heavy. So I don't know, man. I think that would be kind of interesting. Also to make me look like a fool, because the last 2 years I was like, nah, man, Josh Allen's he's a turd. So I'm eating that. But we'll see what happens. But anyways, like I said, we'll talk more about that in detail, even though we just talked about it a bunch. Next week when we have Chad here to kind of preview some of that stuff in the playoffs and also do some postseason wrap-up. Right now, let's get into the Browns game with the Bengals. So, to wrap this game up, Freddie Kitchens was fired like hours after the game. All right. So, anyways, Baker Mayfield
Kitchens had to walk back to Cleveland.
Yeah, basically, right? So Baker Mayfield threw 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions in this game, and honestly, maybe I'm just like a masochist, sadist. Which one is it where you love torture? I don't know. Anyways, part of me wanted to see him throw more interceptions than touchdowns, so that overall on the season he could have more interceptions on touchdowns, just to like add the fuel to the fire for maybe him to like. For the chip to grow. I don't know what he needs, but he fucking needs something. Overall, I guess other than that, passing-wise, he passed for 279 yards, but had a 44% completion rate against the Bengals, the worst defense in the NFL. 44% completion rate. Again, also with the 3 interceptions. Joey, without looking it up, how many times do you think Baker Mayfield was sacked?
4.
6 times Baker Mayfield was sacked. Obviously it's a part of the offensive line, but which has been an issue this season. I mean, obviously, got to give credit to the defensive line of the Bengals, right? Like, you can't. That's something that's been a strong suit of their defense for some time now. But also, Baker just did this game what he was doing earlier on in the season when he was making all these mistakes, which was this captain, save a game, right? So where he's like, I got to be the one to throw this bomb, right? So he started the game off really well. I think it was the second set, right? Yeah, and he threw like a 60-yard pass to Kadarl Hodges right in the end zone. It was beautiful. Everyone's like, oh, wow, look at that. So then, what was it, in like the third quarter, he was under pressure and tried to do the same thing, except it just landed, it was to Odell Beckham, landed right in the hands of Darius Phillips, who had himself a hell of a game, by the way. But anyways, that just kind of goes to show that.
And that pass was double coverage. He overthrew him by like 5 yards.
Yep. I mean, it was so bad. So it just kind of goes to show that, Baker Mayfield maybe has a little bit of the hubris from earlier in the game saying, I can throw these bombs. I can make that kind of shit happen. But obviously it's ill-intended. So, yeah, I don't know, man. Baker Mayfield is an enigma this year. It's really, really strange. His decline is, it's ugly. So let's talk about the strong suit of the Browns the entire season, which is the run game. So you would figure against one of the worst run defenses in the NFL, the Browns would be like, fuck it. We're down. Let's just shove it down their throats. Let's stick to what we know. Let's do what we're good at, and let's keep it rolling. And they didn't, right? Even I was listening to it on the Tomahawk show. They were saying, look, Nick Chubb is really close to getting the rushing title, right? At least let's get some of the motivation of the team of saying, look, we might lose this game. We've already lost out the season. It doesn't matter. But let's at least get one of our players the rushing title for the season. And they didn't even do that. Without looking, Joey, how many yards do you think Nick Chubb rushed for?
Oh, without looking. I already know how many rushing attempts the team had. So,
oh, okay. I don't know that full number, but
47.
41. 41 yards for him. 3.15 yards per attempt, though. Still not bad, right? Not horrible for Nick Chubb. But they definitely should have given him more touches. Let's see, 13 attempts or 13 touches for Nick Chubb. That's the lowest of the entire season, right? That's bad.
Yeah, so immediately I saw 20 rushing attempts for the Browns.
Right.
And my thought
like two of them was from Baker.
My thought was that's a half for the Ravens.
Right.
And so I looked at the Ravens game against the Steelers, 44 attempts. And then the game against the Browns, 40 attempts.
Yeah.
The Ravens do that in a half.
Yeah.
And, this should be the strength of your team.
Right. Even with Kareem Hunt. So, Kareem Hunt.
It's incredible.
I know. Kareem Hunt, his rookie year, right? 1,327. That's how many yards he ran for. 1,327 yards. His total yards with the Browns, quick math, is looking something like it's under 500. I know he only played for those 8 games, but his rushing alone was 179 yards. That's it. I don't know. And I know that you have Nick Chubb and stuff like that, but still, Kareem Hunt, I guess it didn't feel like he got used more. I don't know. You would think with the low productivity of Nick Chubb, maybe they would at least go to Kareem Hunt. No. But Nick Chubb, overall for the season, he ended up with 1,494, which was, I don't know the exact number, but it's less than 100 away from Derrick Henry, who did win overall.
Yeah, I think he was 1,570 or something like that.
So I don't know.
In the 1500s.
It's something that would have been in the grasp by Nick Chubb. It's something that they could have done, but they didn't. So let's talk a little bit about some of the touchdowns thrown by Baker. So there was the one that we said earlier by Kadarl Hodges. There was one by Odell Beckham that was kind of nice. But there was one by Jarvis Landry that actually stuck out to me. So Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham, both of them, it was 3 catches on 6 attempts for Odell and 2 catches on 6 attempts for Jarvis. Both of them are looking good because you say, okay, well, they both got 80-something yards, but only on 2 or 3 different attempts, that's really not that great. But anyways, on Jarvis's touchdown, he got wrapped up by 2 of the Bengals defenders and kind of trucked through both of them, which was nice. And then he kind of walked into the end zone, and the camera zoomed in on his face, and he looked defeated. He looked like he just walked in the end zone. He's just I don't care. And just dropped the ball and just walked off the field. At this point, the Browns were, I guess, technically still in the game, but I also don't blame them because I think it was the fourth quarter, and that touchdown put it to 23-30. So they still kind of were in the game, but I don't know. I think Jarvis Landry, I don't know, man. I'm going to speculate that maybe he's a little dejected. But overall on the season, Jarvis is ending with 1174. Odell Beckham got his over 1,000 yards this season, so I guess, good for him. But, man, the Browns just... It was bad this game, man. It was not fun. The defense was terrible. It was awful. Andy Dalton, not only did he only get sacked once, but he had so much time in that pocket, man. Like, he had every minute, every second, everything that he needed in the pocket to be able to throw exactly what he wanted to. Now, granted, he didn't throw for 1,000 yards or anything crazy like that, right? 190. But still, he was able to make the plays that he needed to make to keep the defenses honest so that Joe Mixon could light off. Joe Mixon.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go. No, you're good.
So Joe Mixon made the Browns defense look like a fucking high school team. Like the JV team, not even the varsity team, right? It was fucking bad. 162 yards, which is the most he's rushed for the entire season, with 2 touchdowns. Joe Mixon was trucking dudes. Safeties, too, like Redwine. So the guy that we kind of talked about and said, maybe he'll make something out of this season. Maybe he'll kind of improve. He trucked the shit out of Redwine. He there was one time where Redwine went to go grab him, wrap him up by the legs, do that whole spin move kind of thing. And, he just stepped right out of it like it was like nothing. It was bad. I don't understand how that happened at all. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, this game kind of felt like two ships passing in the night, and the end of these seasons have been really polar opposite feeling. Like I feel like, and it's harder to see with the Browns offense, but the Browns defense since the Arizona game, it's like you've seen that they just gave up.
Right.
They gave up on Freddie Kitchens. They gave up on Steve Wilkes. Like, they just gave up, man. Like,
yeah.
The tackling was awful. They, there's no other way to explain it. From the very first quarter of the Cardinals game, when the Browns had a chance to still win out and have some things happen, like, they just shit the bed.
Yeah.
And that's probably what cost Freddie his job. You can't lose to the Bengals with the expectations that you had, and after they've already locked up the number 1 draft pick,
right.
And keep your job. It's just how it is, man. So,
yeah.
And on the flip side of that, to do a little Bengals corner, these guys have fought hard for Zach Taylor, and even if on offense, if they're fighting hard for Andy Dalton, or Andy Dalton's trying to stick it to the Bengals and get his money somewhere else, whatever it is, Darius Phillips has come on strong. Carlos Dunlap closed the season really strong. These guys have gone out there and put together 2 wins in 3 weeks, or 2 wins in 4 weeks, whatever it is.
Yeah,
good for them.
So, like you're saying, they played hard for Zach Taylor, but I also think they played hard to, shut down the Browns, basically.
Yeah.
I think it's maybe a division rivalry, but also maybe just because of the personalities. So to go back to your comment about the defense kind of losing Freddie, or Freddie losing the defense, Freddie lost a lot of people on offense too. I mean, obviously with all the arguments that were being had left and right on the sidelines, I think it's pretty obvious that the team lost confidence in Freddie Kitchens, which is clearly the reason why he's gone, right? But anyways, so as far as the Bengals go, if you're a Bengals fan, man, I don't know. I was scrolling through some comments and stuff like that on some different pages and some YouTube videos and a bunch of other different things talking about the Bengals, and everyone's like, "Oh, thanks for the great times, Andy Dalton. We appreciate everything you've done for us." Blah blah blah. All in this very past tense kind of a sound. And to me, it was kind of one of these whoa, slow down for a second, right? Andy Dalton is still a good quarterback, and I think he showed that this game, that he's still good. He's not bad. So I don't know. I'm kind of interested to see what they do in the offseason. He's not old, right? So I don't know. Do you think they go and pick up Joe Burrow?
Oh, they have to.
Yeah,
have to. oh, were you just gonna add Chase Young to like the best unit on your football team on the defensive end? Like, man, you have to. You can't pass on him.
What do you do with Andy
I
Dalton?
really don't think you can pass on him. Trade him to someone.
If they're going to trade him, they should have traded him already. Should have done it before the deadline.
Is he a free agent this year?
I don't think so. I can double check
No?
though. But
Well, then trade him. Whatever.
yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting. But
Yeah, we'll get into that. I think Joe Burrow is. I mean, after what he did this weekend, so in the semifinals
right.
of the college football playoffs, he threw for 7 touchdowns in the first half. It's crazy against someone that's supposed to be the number 4 team in the country.
Right.
Man, he's really good. If they don't take him, they better get a fucking haul for that number 1 pick. But I mean, Zach Taylor came in, and he'd love to tie himself to a quarterback.
That's true.
Offensive head coaches typically do. And they can get something for if Andy Dalton's got. We'll have to look it up. I'm too lazy right now.
No, 2021
We'll
is when his
dive
contract
into
is
it.
expired. But
It's
yeah,
expired?
2021.
Okay, so he has another year, so they could still get some value for Andy Dalton. Yeah, he's advertised himself pretty well since he came back.
Yeah.
So
Well, the other question is too, though, is that you sign a rookie, but does that mean that you immediately get rid of your veteran?
that's true.
So I don't know. We'll kind of see how that plays out. It also depends on what kind of I guess like a leader Andy Dalton is, right? Is he the guy to take someone under his wing and take it like a professional, or is he going to be, I don't know. Joe Flacco does come to mind. I don't know why, or is he going to be kind of like this guy that's like, look, I'm still here to play and I'm still here to be a starter.
Yeah.
Or Ben Roethlisberger is another great example.
Yeah, I think part of that can fall on. I mean, probably the most high-profile example of like a quarterback that wasn't ready to hang it up when his team drafted his successor was Favre when the Packers drafted Aaron. He was not there to help Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Like, he still thought he had some in the tank, and he did not give a fuck about grooming Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
And even if that type of situation happens, like Zach Taylor still gets a chance to spend a year getting Joe Burrow comfortable with the offense. And so, yeah, there could still be, I hadn't even considered that. There could still be a lot of value in keeping Andy Dalton around for another year while Joe Burrow learns. Like, there's no reason to thrust him into, if you're not expecting to contend next year, which I don't think they should be.
No.
Like, why rush?
Right. They still have a very incomplete team. But I guess to me, what kind of threw me for a loop was the idea of hearing all these Bengals fans acting like it was like a eulogy for Andy Dalton. And I'm just not so convinced that you should just immediately get rid of him before the season, before next season starts. But again, there's a lot of factors that go into that. And I guess we'll talk more about that when we get into our more detail, when we do some more research and get into our off-season kind of analysis and season wrap-up.
Yeah, and the big differences between like the other cases that we've talked about and this one is those rookie quarterbacks were all drafted later in the draft. They weren't like top of the draft guys.
Right.
Aaron Rodgers notoriously dropped in the first round a whole bunch, and like Lamar was the last pick of the first round, and everyone that the Steelers have drafted in the last 5 years have been not even first round guys, and if you draft Joe Burrow number 1, you're drafting him to be the guy, and whoever your quarterback is knows that. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Lots to delve into there. It's a really interesting situation.
But yeah, so to wrap the game up, I guess from a Bengals perspective as well, the defense, obviously the pass rush was fantastic. So Sam Hubbard had 2 sacks. Yeah, Sam Hubbard had 2 sacks. Carlos Dunlap with 3. And then Darius Phillips, man, had himself a game. 2 interceptions on Baker Mayfield. So also defended 3 passes on top of that. So good on him.
Boy.
Yeah. So that's the Browns and the Bengals. The Bengals still have the number 1 pick overall in the draft. This game had no bearing on them whatsoever, which is, I guess, even more interesting. How it turned out the way that it did. Obviously, the Browns didn't really have anything to play for other than pride, which is something that they, I guess, really haven't been playing very much for all season, or at least to help Nick Chubb, get the rushing title. But they obviously weren't fucking playing for that either. So it's been a hell of a season. That being said, now I guess is kind of when we'll do some of the news stuff. So as we talked about earlier, Freddie Kitchens got fired like hours after the game. What I thought was actually kind of interesting too was almost immediately after the game there was a press conference with John Dorsey and Freddie Kitchens, which was their post-game press conference. But I hadn't really seen much of John Dorsey in a long time, so to me it was kind of interesting to kind of see him back at the podium with Freddie Kitchens, and it kind of perked my ears up a little bit. It turned out to be kind of like a normal end of the game, press conference, whatever. But not only was Freddie Kitchens fired shortly thereafter, but also, what was it, just yesterday, we found out that John Dorsey voluntarily left, or whatever. They voluntarily parted ways.
Mutually agreed.
However that stuff works out, whatever, right? Which is kind of interesting as well. I don't really know why that happened. Apparently, from Adam Schefter, the rumor is that the Haslams, who are the owners of the Browns, and John Dorsey just had fundamental disagreements about how to keep restructuring the organization. And, man, I have to say that I probably would have gone with John Dorsey on this, unless John Dorsey's take was we need to give Freddie more time, which feels a little bit like what might have been, but I obviously can't say definitively. Just with the way that kind of things went, with the way that Freddie Kitchens was immediately fired and then John Dorsey just kind of hung it up, I don't know. It's kind of weird. It's strange.
Yeah, it's very strange. I know Freddie Kitchens was John Dorsey's guy.
Yeah, technically.
I thought John Dorsey was doing a good job as a GM. And I think if you're the Haslams, you should have listened to him.
Right.
It was really weird when, I think it was like Monday, some report came out, and I sent it to you and Chad, that like the Browns were saying that like the new head coach might have a say in what happens in the organization after he's hired, as far as like GMs and things like that. And you were like, well, that makes no fucking sense, and why would they get rid of Dorsey? He's doing good, which is all true. It doesn't make any sense. The whole thing has the fragrance of like, look, this is the same old shit Browns. Like, that's what this whole thing smells like.
It's true.
Like, you have a widely regarded as a good GM, at least good, maybe great. Like, he built the early Aaron Rodgers Packers the way that we know them. He built the current Chiefs the way that we know them. Like, he's got the credit. He's got the NFL credibility. Like, I don't understand it. And even firing Freddie, whether you agree with it or not, the thing about firing Freddie is it's just another coach that you're fired after 1 year. You know, no matter how you feel about what the team should have been this year, like, well, now you have another coach gone, and now Baker's going to have his third offensive coordinator in 3 years to start the season. Like,
yeah, that's kind of the big number everyone keeps talking about as far as Baker. It's going to be his third head coach in 3 years, which is...
And you know who's already taken victory laps on Baker? I'm sure you could guess.
Rex Ryan?
Colin Cowherd.
Oh, yeah?
He got on Twitter. He said, remarkable how blinded smart people get with football. Today in Cleveland, it's, quote, finally the head coach is gone and the GM is overrated. Yet the quarterback finished the year with fewer touchdowns, more interceptions, a lower completion rate, a passer rating with the addition of OBJ, add several PR gaffes. We sure the problem is gone?
You know, honestly, man, at this point, I have to say he's not wrong. Are we sure?
I mean, yeah, spot the lie.
Do we know? Yeah, exactly, right? Spot the lie. I don't know how sure we are. Which is kind of what I was saying before with Baker being an enigma. Like, I feel like I have to like hold my tongue because I don't want to go too far, like over the edge and be like, fuck Baker. But at the same time, I also don't want to go to the other edge of the things and say, nah, man, Baker's fine. He's good. He'll do great next year. Because at this point, it's like we've seen two sides of, of the same coin. And I don't think we know what to expect next year. I will say this, that with all this head coaching searches and trying to figure out who should be there, people are throwing around a lot of names. What I will say is that I think that they need a veteran head coach that has credibility to be able to get those guys back in line to say, you need to listen to me because I know what the fuck I'm doing and I know how to make winners, right? So a lot of people are talking about like a bunch of like first-time head coaches, and I will say that if you've never been a head coach in the NFL, personally, you're not my pick for head coach for the Browns. They need somebody who's been there, done that, been through highs, been through lows, whatever it is, to make that kind of happen.
There's not enough veterans on this team for that.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Like when the Ravens hired John Harbaugh,
mm-hmm.
It was Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs, Ed Reed, Yonda. Like you had leaders everywhere.
Yeah.
This team doesn't have that. You need I agree with you.
Oh,
you need
okay.
somebody to come in, some veteran guy to come in and swing his credibility around.
Right. So even to me, even the one that people keep talking about, Josh McDaniels, I'm not crazy about that, man. Because two reasons. Number one, because like I said, you have to know what winning feels like, but you also have to know what losing feels like to be able to rally guys together through that, right? And not just be, well, you need to fucking do your job better. Not to say that that's who he is or what he is, but that's obviously the Belichick mindset from the outside looking in, right? And I don't know that that's going to work on a team that's so used to losing, right? So that's one of the facets of it. And the second one is something that I brought up to you earlier, which was that, obviously there's been no winning head coaches coming out of the Belichick tree, right? So I don't know. That seems like quite the curse to me. That nobody coming from Belichick has been successful. So,
yeah, I think one guy, I don't know if his name's being talked about much. He's not one of the trendy guys because he's not a new guy. Jim Caldwell.
Yeah.
He got fired in Detroit after a winning season.
Mm-hmm.
He's got
after like 3 winning seasons, right?
He's got like 7 years as a head coach.
Yeah.
With various teams. He's an offensive mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's a guy that sticks out to me because I feel like the market's a little thin as far as like veteran head Mike McCarthy.
Yeah, everyone's talking about like elevating all these coordinators that are doing well in other teams,
college coaches,
and just none of those give me that feel good in that sense. So yeah, Jim Caldwell. For a second, I don't know why I was thinking about the guy that was with the with the Colts. I don't know why I was thinking of him.
He was with the Colts for a little bit.
Was he?
You were thinking Chuck Pagano?
Chuck Pagano, that's who I was thinking of. Yeah. But anyways, so yeah, Jim Caldwell, so obviously the former Lions coach, which was, kind of a mystery to me, but whatever. Once I actually kind of looked into his record and with him. Mike McCarthy was somebody that I didn't like going into last season, and I said no thanks. But at this point, I don't know, man, maybe. Like I said, I think that they're striving for leadership and a strong presence. I don't know what Mike McCarthy was like, but at least I can say that he's kind of been there. He's been through being a head coach through highs and lows. So maybe he'll be able to do something with it. The Browns being, I don't know. Would you say that the Browns were structured at all the way that the Packers were at one point? I mean, you got like guys like Randall Cobb when he was in his prime, Jordy Nelson in his prime. You had a year you had a couple of good running backs, and then you had Aaron Rodgers, right? Whereas this team kind of has, I don't know, maybe some similarities. I don't know, man. I'm grasping at straws, but
yeah. Looking at Caldwell, I'm on the Caldwell train. That's my official stance. So I'll make a quick case for Caldwell because we can dig into all this stuff later.
Yeah.
He had 3 years with the Colts with Peyton, obviously. So there's discussion to be had already
for sure.
About Adam Gase got the Peyton Manning bump, and that's what got him his jobs because he coordinated for him in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
But he was 14-2 and 10-6 with Peyton. And then the year Peyton got hurt, they went 2-14. That was his last year at Indianapolis. And then they drafted Luck. And then with the Lions, his last 2 seasons, so this was he had 2 full seasons after Calvin Johnson up and retired on them. Back-to-back 9 and 7 years.
Yeah.
With
after losing
the best wide receiver in the game retiring early on you.
Right. Yeah.
Dude.
You know the other one that actually people have thrown around that I think is overwhelmingly impractical, however, I think I would accept as not head coach, would be either of the coordinators from the Ravens. Because I think that even though they haven't been head coaches, at least I don't think that they have. This is just off the cusp, I guess.
I think Roman may have for like a year.
Right. But not like cemented as a head coach, right? I think that they have earned so much respect from players in the division and obviously around the entire NFL that they can come in and say, look, we know what fucking winning looks like. So I don't really know, but we'll see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen with the GM spot either. Maybe they're going to try to, I don't know. So that whole speculation thing where it was like, well, the GM might have a say in picking, the head coach might have a say in picking the GM. That sounds really speculative to me. I don't know. That sounds like some pot stirring to me more than anything. It just, they're just so different from one another. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. And if you're getting a guy,
like how would something like that come in up in even conversation?
It's not unprecedented to give your head coach GM responsibilities.
True.
Belichick's really the only one that does it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But Mike Holmgren's done it before. Like if you're gonna bring in a guy that's been around, like it's something you could do. But the whole thing, what a shit show, man.
I know.
Like you really like what a difference a year makes. Like you really feel like Dorsey's on the right track, even given a head coaching vacancy last year after the season ended. And it's like, now he's gone and you still don't have a head coach and you've regressed with what you think about the quarterback position. Like,
you say what a difference a year makes. And I say what a difference it doesn't.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Obviously, more news to come as it develops. But there's rumors of Steve Wilkes being poached, which I wouldn't be upset about at all. I'm not a fan of Steve Wilkes after seeing kind of what has happened this season. Olivier Vernon was back in this game and didn't really do much of anything. I think he had like a half sack or something. But, I mean, the defensive line just couldn't get anything done, which is an enigma to me, right? Ogunjobi is good. Yeah. Sheldon Richardson is good. Olivier Vernon is good. So even if you have 3 strong defensive linemen, like you should still be able to produce. So I don't know. And even obviously everywhere else over the ball, Denzel Ward not really having that great of a season. Greedy Williams starting over Terrence Mitchell, which is an enigma to me also. Like I don't get it. So I don't know. But yeah, so the Browns are still a shit show. We'll see what happens in the offseason. Hopefully the new uniforms look fucking dope. But that's really all I'm looking forward to at this point.
Get rid of the white pants.
Yeah, man. Fucking white on white.
You don't need them home or away. You don't need them.
No, not at all. So actually it's funny because the game started and they came out in white on white. So white tops, white bottoms. And the first thing that happened was I texted Joey and Chad and I said, that's no. They're going to lose this game. And guess what happened? They fucking lost. So white on white. It's weird though because it's like one of those old uniforms. So of course these fucking old heads just like cannot let that shit go. But people talk about how much they love that uniform, and I think it looks fucking stupid. But whatever. So anyways, that's pretty much week 17, man.
Yeah. Some loose ends to tie up from the other game. The Steelers extended Tuzar Skipper, outside linebacker. It likely means that Anthony, I think his name's Anthony Chickalo, alleged domestic abuser and probable piece of shit human, is going to be a cap casualty more than likely. And the Ravens signed Marcus Peters to a 3-year, $42 million extension, which is a steal, if you ask me, for a Pro Bowl corner, $14 million a year. So that's it as far as transactions that happened this week outside of the big ones in Cleveland.
Yeah, so, But all right, guys. So like I said, next week we're going to talk a little bit more about some off-season stuff. I know we talked a little bit about it, this episode, just because it kind of, naturally formed or whatever you want to say, organically. But we're also going to do a little bit of a season kind of review, a recap, if you will, of where things started and then how things kind of turned out with each of the teams and how this kind of sees them moving forward. Do a little bit of an super early draft analysis for most of the teams, since 3 of the 4 teams are not going to be playing in the playoffs. And then we'll also be able to preview the Ravens. We won't be able to preview that next week. But we'll talk a little bit about their path to the Super Bowl, the teams that they will have to go through, and what kind of expectations we can see from those teams against the Ravens, those kind of matchups. So
we'll know who the Ravens are playing next week.
Oh, we will know who they're playing. That's right.
So. And you want to do a quick little off the cuff players of the week?
Yes. Darius Phillips would be my defensive player of the week. Either that or Carlos Dunlap, man. I don't know, 3 sacks. Pretty big. But I'll say Darius Phillips, being a nickel guy. 2 interceptions, 3 defended passes. He played pretty well.
I'll go Carlos Dunlap.
Cool.
We'll those guys. They both had good games.
Carlos Dunlap actually almost had an interception. It hit him in the fucking stomach and just bounced right off. So, but yeah.
Yep. And offense, this one's easy, I think.
Oh yeah, Joe Mixon.
Yep.
Sorry, I was looking at something.
Gus Edwards.
All right, there you go.
There you go.
I was thinking of Chuck Pagano before. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
He was the coach after Caldwell in Indianapolis.
Yeah. But anyways, guys. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for hanging out. Regular season's over. On to the postseason. And I guess we're all rooting for the Ravens at this point, I guess. I don't know. Whatever.
Fucking A right, we are.
All right, guys. Take it easy.